In 2032, in the heart of the Pacific Ocean, the research vessel Leviathan, from the Blue Horizon Oceanography Corporation, was conducting a mission to survey the Mariana Trench. The scientific team on board, led by Dr. Ethan Graves, an expert in ancient marine life, was tracking a mysterious ultrasonic signal coming from depths greater than 10,000 meters. This signal is unlike anything we've encountered before, said Dr. Emily Carter, an expert in ocean acoustics. On the sonar screen, a massive object moved slowly, 3 times the size of a blue whale. This is not a normal creature, Ethan muttered, his eyes fixed on the screen. It's moving towards us. Before they could react, the surface of the sea suddenly began to swirl violently. The Leviathan shook violently, as a massive shadow rose from the depths of the ocean. Long tentacles, tens of meters in length, coiled around the ship, crushing its thick metal hull as if it were a toy. What the hell is this? A scream echoed as waves dozens of meters high crashed in. The creature revealed its terrifying form, a colossal being with rough, lava-like skin, hundreds of glowing red eyes, and tentacles covered in sharp spikes, reaching out like predatory snakes. It was not just a monster. It was a prehistoric nightmare, a sea god that had slept for millions of years, and now, it had awakened. The alarm blared across the Leviathan as the ship's hull was deformed by the giant tentacles. Dr. Ethan Graves held onto a metal bar as violent shaking caused everything in the control room to crash down. We've lost control. The steering system isn't responding. Captain Ryan Holt's voice rang out amid the chaos. Through the pressure-resistant window, Ethan saw the monster illuminated by the spotlight. It was so enormous, it seemed unbelievable, a creature that was a hybrid of a giant squid, a sea dragon, and a prehistoric beast. The spikes on its tentacles glowed in the ocean's darkness, emitting a fiery red bioluminescent light. We need to get out of here, now. Dr. Emily Carter screamed. She was scanning the radar, and discovered that the monster wasn't alone. Under the deep ocean, other blurry shapes were moving, an entire swarm of massive creatures was awakening. Damn! It's not just one monster. It's the ruler of an entire kingdom beneath the sea, Ethan gritted his teeth. A violent impact caused the ship to tilt to one side. The electrical system flickered. A crack appeared in the control room's protective glass. It's pulling us down to the ocean floor. Ryan bellowed, struggling to adjust the engines to escape the tightening tentacles. Ethan quickly input the command to launch the superpressure torpedoes, designed to counter large marine creatures. Fire immediately. A deafening explosion shattered the dark water. The torpedo exploded near the creature's head, creating a powerful shockwave. The monster screamed, a low, resonant sound that shook them to their bones. Seizing the moment, Ryan pushed the ship to maximum speed, escaping the grip of the tentacles. The Leviathan shot upward, speeding towards the surface at a terrifying pace. But before they could breathe a sigh of relief, another enormous shape appeared directly in front of them. An even larger creature, with a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth and glowing red eyes like hellfire, was waiting above them. We haven't escaped yet. Ethan thought, cold sweat trickling down his spine. The Leviathan sped up, cutting through the water at full power, but the newly appeared creature had no intention of letting them go. Its fiery red eyes locked onto the ship, observing its prey as it prepared to strike. Damn it! What is that thing? Ryan screamed, gripping the control lever tightly. Dr. Emily Carter scanned the sonar data, but the returning signal didn't resemble any creature known to humankind. This new monster was even larger than the one that had attacked them earlier. Its black skin resembled the abyss of the ocean, with glowing green fins running down its back. Ethan gasped. A supreme predator. It was the king of these waters. We can't escape if we're caught between these two monsters. Emily warned. Just then, the new monster opened its mouth, revealing hundreds of knife-like teeth. It let out a roar so powerful that the Leviathan shook violently, and the surrounding water began to bubble. It's about to attack. Ryan shouted. Ethan immediately input the command to fire. 2 high-speed torpedoes were launched, heading straight for the massive creature. But in the blink of an eye, it twisted and dodged astonishingly, then swung its whip-like tail hard into the Leviathan. Bam! The impact tore a part of the ship's hull, and the alarm system shrieked wildly. Seawater began flooding into the lower compartments. "We can't fight it!" Emily screamed. But before the Leviathan could sink further, the first monster, the one that had attacked them initially, suddenly charged at the supreme predator. The enormous tentacles wrapped around the enemy, pulling it into a deadly battle. Ryan seized the opportunity. "Hold on. I'm pushing the speed to max." The Leviathan shot forward, bursting through the dark waters. Behind them, the 2 colossal monsters clashed, sending deadly shockwaves through the ocean. Inside the ship, Ethan checked the systems. The hull had suffered severe damage. If they didn't repair it soon, they wouldn't survive much longer. "We need to find shelter before the ship explodes," Emily warned. Ryan stared at the radar. A weak signal appeared on the screen. "There's a fissure ahead, maybe we'll find a safe area inside." With no other choice, they headed toward the fissure, unaware that another terrible secret awaited them inside. The Leviathan weaved through the underwater rocks, and slid into the crack at the ocean floor. The dark night enveloped the ship, with only faint lights from the forward headlights illuminating the way. "Where are we going?" Ryan asked, eyes fixed on the radar screen. "A region not recorded on the maps," Emily replied, her voice tense. "But something feels very strange." They ventured deeper, and suddenly, a bizarre sight appeared before them. A massive city submerged in darkness, covered in ancient corals and seaweed. Towering stone buildings, intricately carved statues, all abandoned for thousands of years. Ethan's eyes widened. An underwater civilization? No way. Is this another Atlantis? Emily whispered, her eyes alight with excitement. But before they could observe further, the sensors detected movement. "Something's coming," Ryan warned. From the dark corners of the ancient city, shadows began to move. At first, it was 1, then 2, then dozens. They were not alone here. And what lay hidden in this city could be even more terrifying than the monsters above. The radar screen flashed constantly. Red dots appeared densely around the ship, moving at terrifying speed. "We're surrounded," Ryan screamed, gripping the controls. Emily tried to analyze the data. They're not fish, nor are they Leviathan. They are human-sized." Ethan looked through the reinforced glass. The darkness consumed everything, but he could see something was swimming towards them. Then, a dark figure slammed into the ship's window, revealing its terrifying shape. It was a creature, half human, half fish, but its face was distorted, its eyes blank and soulless, its pale, ulcerated skin. Long, sharp claws scraped against the glass, creating a chilling screech. "My God, what is this?" Emily recoiled, her voice trembling. But before there was an answer, the entire swarm of creatures lunged at the ship, surrounding it from all sides. The glass shook. The sound of metal screeching. Ryan quickly shoved the control lever, activating the thrusters to break free. "Hold on," Ethan shouted. The ship rocked violently as they tried to escape. But then the giant hand grabbed the tail of the ship. It wasn't just small creatures, there was something larger, stronger, waiting for them. The entire ship shook violently. Something massive had clamped onto the tail, pulling them further into the darkness. "What is that?" Emily screamed, her eyes wide with terror. Ryan struggled to control the ship at full power, but it was useless. The creature was too strong. Then, it appeared. A monstrous sea creature, 3 times the size of their ship. Its gray, scarred skin seemed to have survived centuries of battle. Its large eyes burned like fiery embers from the depths of the sea. But the most terrifying part was its teeth, sharp as swords, long enough that when it opened its mouth, they could see a swirling black vortex in its throat. "This is the Leviathan," Ethan gasped. The creature swung its massive arm, striking the ship, making it tip wildly. "Hold on. We can't let it drag us to the bottom," Ryan shouted, trying to activate the weapons system. Emily hit the button, launching 2 torpedoes. Boom! 2 massive explosions shook the surrounding water. But when the smoke cleared, the Leviathan was still there. Not a scratch. It roared, its red eyes burning with hatred. Then, to their horror, it opened its mouth, and a catastrophic shockwave erupted. The water pressure crushed the ship, obliterating everything in its path. The ship rocked violently as the shockwave from the Leviathan slammed into the hull, creating immense pressure. "It's playing with us." Ryan gritted his teeth, clutching the steering wheel. Emily quickly checked the weapons system. "All the torpedoes are useless. We can't kill it with conventional weapons." Ethan screamed, "We have to run. If we don't escape, this monster will crush us all." Ryan pushed the ship to full power. The engines roared, and the ship shot forward at a frenzied pace, leaving a trail of light in the cold night. But Leviathan wouldn't let go. It cut through the water, following them with incredible speed. From a distance, its red eyes burned like hellfire, watching the prey try to escape. "It's catching up to us faster," Emily screamed. The radar signal blinked continuously. "It can't be." Ethan stared at the screen, his face pale. "There are more than one." Beneath the ship, other massive shapes began to appear. Leviathan was not alone. They were facing not just one monster, but an entire swarm of colossal sea creatures, unknown to humankind. Ryan knew they couldn't escape on the surface of the water. "We have to dive," he shouted. Ethan looked at him like he was crazy. "Dive? Are you insane? Down there, we'll just die faster." But they had no other choice. Ryan hit the emergency button, activating deep dive mode. The hatch slammed shut, and the pressure changed rapidly. The ship began to plummet to the ocean floor, piercing through the dark layers of water. Leviathan and its pod followed. They passed through underwater fissures, where light couldn't reach. All around them was only darkness, and strange creatures lurked in the depths of the ocean. Suddenly, a mysterious blue light flickered from below. Emily frowned. "Wait, what's that?" At the bottom of the deep sea, something even older than Leviathan. Warning alarms echoed throughout the Leviathan ship. Red lights flashed fiercely, reflecting on the tense faces of the crew. Below the ocean floor, the dense darkness seemed to stir, signaling something terrible was about to rise. Dr. Ethan Graves gripped the control panel, his eyes glued to the sonar screen. A massive red dot was moving at an incredible speed. "No way. It's heading straight for us." Captain Jim Reynolds tightened his grip on the wheel. "Everyone, to your positions. We might be about to face something no one wants to see." Dr. Emily Carter took a deep breath, gripping the harpoon gun they had designed to fight the monster. "Do we have a plan, or are we just waiting to die?" A low growl rumbled from the deep sea, shaking the entire ship. The sound of metal screeching echoed as a giant arm with smooth, black skin, scarred from millennia of battles, wrapped around the ship. The Kraken Leviathan, the legendary monster they once thought was just a myth, was now squeezing their ship like a toy. Its eyes, glowing red like embers smoldering at the ocean's floor, fixed on the tiny humans who dared to trespass into its territory. "Fire!" Captain Jim shouted. Emily pulled the trigger, and a harpoon shot straight into the creature's skin. A high-pitched screech rang out, but instead of backing off, it tightened its grip on the ship. Water pressure increased, and the ship shook violently. Everything began to break apart. Ethan quickly entered commands into the system. "We need to activate the electric warheads. If not, we have no chance of escaping." Jim nodded. "Do it now." Emily and Ethan rushed to the control panel, activating the system. A flash of blue light lit up the darkness as the electric warheads were fired. A powerful shockwave spread, cutting through the ink-black water. Kraken Leviathan roared in fury, loosening its grip on the ship slightly. "This is our chance." Jim shouted. Maximum power. Get out of here now. The Leviathan ship trembled violently as the engines were pushed to their limits. Water pressure spiked, and alarms blared throughout the system. But the Kraken Leviathan wasn't ready to let go. Dr. Ethan Graves shouted, the propulsion system is overloading. We can't maintain this speed any longer. Captain Jim Reynolds gritted his teeth, his hands tightly gripping the control panel. We have no choice. If we don't get away, we'll be crushed. A deep roar echoed from the darkness. The creature's red eyes flared as it charged forward, its massive tentacles sweeping by, nearly crushing the ship's tail. A violent impact threw Dr. Emily Carter into the wall, blood trickling from her forehead. We need a decisive blow. Emily gasped, gripping the harpoon gun tightly. Ethan quickly entered commands into the weapon system. We still have 2 electric warheads, but this time we need to hit its weak spot. Jim nodded. Emily, can you do it? Emily wiped the blood from her face, her eyes flashing with determination. Keep it in my sights. The Kraken Leviathan roared, charging forward. One tentacle swung across, tearing apart part of the ship's body. Water began flooding into the lower compartments. Fire now! Jim shouted. Emily pulled the trigger. 2 electric warheads shot out, piercing the thick skin of the creature, embedding deep, just beneath its eyes. A flash of blue light appeared, and then a massive explosion erupted. The Kraken Leviathan howled in agony, thrashing wildly. The water around them turned into a chaotic whirlpool. The Leviathan ship was sucked in, swaying like a fragile leaf in a storm. It's not dead. But we need to leave now. Ethan screamed. Jim didn't hesitate, pushing the ship to maximum power. The ship trembled, engines roaring, cutting through the dark water. Behind them, Kraken Leviathan still writhed, its tentacles jerking violently. But then, gradually, its colossal shape faded into the deep ocean's darkness. A heavy silence fell over the control room. Emily let her body relax, collapsing onto the floor, panting. Did we really escape? Ethan looked at the radar screen, his heart still pounding. It retreated, but I don't think this is the end. Jim nodded, his expression thoughtful. Yeah, I think so too. A monster like that won't just give up. Far below, at the ocean's bottom, its red eyes suddenly flared to life again. Jim nodded, with no other choice. Do it. Set course for the Mariana Trench. Ethan entered the command, the navigation system sounding alarms. Descending to 7,000 meters. 8,000 meters. We're exceeding the safety limit. Kraken Leviathan was still close behind, its enormous tentacles thrashing powerfully, creating violent whirlpools. It wouldn't give up. It wanted to destroy them. Emily, prepare the trap. Jim barked. Emily activated the timed detonator. 30 seconds until the shockwave hits. The Leviathan ship dove into the pitch-black trench. Kraken Leviathan followed, without hesitation. Massive rocks began to fall from the trench walls as the shockwave started to spread. 10 seconds. Ethan screamed. Jim yanked the controls, steering the ship sharply out of the trench. Kraken Leviathan didn't react in time, getting caught in the violent whirlpool. Giant rocks from above fell, crushing its enormous body. A terrible roar rang out, and then silence. The Leviathan ship shot upward, narrowly escaping the collapse of the trench. The alarm system went quiet, leaving only the heavy breathing of the survivors. Emily looked at Jim, her voice trembling. Did we really make it? Ethan stood motionless, staring at the radar screen. No more signals from Kraken Leviathan. Jim exhaled, his hand gripping the wheel tightly. It's over. But was it truly over? Or, deep in the ocean's depths, were there more nightmares waiting? Inside the Leviathan ship, the atmosphere was suffocating and tense. Small sparks still flew from damaged control panels, and the sound of metal groaning echoed from outside the ship's hull. Dr. Ethan Graves hurriedly checked the systems. We're down 60% power. If this continues, we'll be stuck down here forever. Captain Jim Reynolds gritted his teeth. We can't stop. The monster could come back at any moment. Dr. Emily Carter glanced out the reinforced glass window. The thick darkness outside still seemed to shift, as if something was watching them. We need to find a safe place to repair the ship before we're swallowed up. Suddenly, the sonar emitted a strange signal. Something massive was approaching, but it wasn't Kraken Leviathan. What the hell is that? Ethan muttered, his eyes wide as images from the cameras appeared on the screen. It was a massive structure, submerged deep under the ocean, covered in ancient seaweed and coral. But the strangest part was, it wasn't natural. Jim squinted. An underwater base? No way. Who could build something like this at this depth? Emily took a deep breath. Maybe we're not the first ones to find this monster. Suddenly, a sharp sound rang through the ship, followed by a powerful explosion. The entire ship shook violently, the lights flashing intermittently. Ethan screamed, "We're being attacked." A strange blue beam shot up from the base at the ocean floor, wrapping around the Leviathan ship like a massive trap. Jim quickly tried to maneuver the ship, but it was useless. The gravitational pull was too strong. They were being pulled down, deeper. Outside, a massive door of the base began to open, revealing something no one had ever expected. And then, the darkness consumed them. Inside the Leviathan ship, the air was thick with tension. The sounds of the hull cracking still echoed, reminding everyone that they hadn't escaped danger. Outside, the deep sea remained pitch black, but something was moving. Dr. Ethan Graves stared at the sonar screen. We have a problem. A new signal just appeared. Dr. Emily Carter frowned. Don't tell me it's another monster. Captain Jim Reynolds gripped the controls tightly. It's not just one. I think we've just awoken an entire colony. On the screen, a series of red dots began to appear, moving at a terrifying speed. Kraken Leviathan was not alone. It seemed that this legendary monster was just the vanguard for an even more terrifying force deep beneath the ocean. A deep growl echoed from the darkness. Enormous tentacles extended from the ocean floor, swirling the water around the ship. Other creatures, smaller but just as ferocious, rose from the depths, surrounding the ship like a pack of hunting sharks. Everyone to battle positions. Jim shouted. Ethan activated Leviathan's defense system, while Emily quickly reloaded the harpoon gun. The electric harpoons shot out, but the number of monsters was too overwhelming for them to withstand for long. A loud explosion sounded from the engine compartment. Damn it! The propulsion system is damaged. We can't retreat. Ethan screamed. Emily gritted her teeth. Then we have one choice left, fight to the end. A pair of glowing red eyes slowly emerged from the darkness, even larger than Kraken Leviathan. A massive creature never before recorded was awakening, the Lord of the Abyss, the true ruler of the deep ocean. Can Leviathan and the crew survive this nightmare? Or is this the end for them? Inside the Leviathan ship, the atmosphere was so tense it felt as though it could be sliced into pieces. The cracks in the ship's hull were still visible, remnants of the horrific battle with the Kraken Leviathan. Though they had escaped the massive tentacles, the explorers knew one thing for sure. The monster was still out there, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Dr. Ethan Graves stood before the radar screen, his eyes fixed on the massive red dot moving slowly along the ocean floor. It's still there. It's lurking, watching us. Captain Jim Reynolds gripped the helm tightly, his voice rough. So what do we do? Keep running, or face it again? Dr. Emily Carter stared at the seafloor map. We can't keep running forever. We need to figure out why it's so aggressive. If we can uncover its secret, we might have a chance of surviving. Suddenly, the ship's electrical systems flickered violently. Rows of lights went out, leaving only the dim glow of emergency lights. A low, rumbling sound echoed through the thick glass, as if an ancient force was whispering beneath the ocean. It's right below us, Ethan said quietly, his voice full of warning. Outside the window, the darkness seemed to stir. A massive shadow passed by, completely blocking the light from the ship's headlights. A glowing red eye, as deep as the ocean's abyss, drifted across the glass. For a brief moment, Emily felt as though the Kraken Leviathan was staring right at her, piercing her soul with its endless fury. Boom! The ship shook violently. A massive blow from the creature's tentacle shattered part of the outer protective frame. The alarm systems blared loudly. "It wants to crush us!" Jim yelled. "Everyone to battle stations." Ethan ran to the control panel, activating the electromagnetic harpoon system. "We can't let it drag us deeper. If we do, the water pressure will crush the ship." Emily rummaged through the equipment compartment, pulling out a special sonar device she had been researching for years. "If we can emit a compatible frequency, we might disrupt it, or even communicate with it." Jim gritted his teeth. "You're talking about negotiating with a killer monster. If it truly wanted to kill us, we'd be dead already," Emily replied, her gaze sharp. "It's not just a mindless beast. It's protecting something." Ethan hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Let's try. If there's a chance, we should take it." Emily took a deep breath and activated the sonar device. A shrill sound rang out, spreading through the seawater like a message from the human world to the ocean's monster. The Kraken Leviathan suddenly stopped. Its massive tentacles stopped thrashing wildly. The red eyes fixed on the Leviathan ship, but this time, there was no murderous intent in them. Inside the ship, everyone held their breath. They had stirred an ancient force, and now, all they could do was hope it wouldn't drag them into the eternal darkness of the ocean. The warning sirens blared loudly in the Leviathan's control room. Though they had escaped the Kraken Leviathan's claws, everyone knew it hadn't given up. The oppressive feeling took over the ship as the stormy waves pounded the hull, as if the ocean itself was angry and wanted to drown them. Dr. Ethan Graves clenched his teeth, his eyes never leaving the radar screen. "It's still out there, and it's watching us." Captain Jim Reynolds tightened his grip on the helm, sweat beading on his forehead. "We can't keep running. If it decides to hunt us down, we'll run out of energy eventually." Dr. Emily Carter checked the harpoon launcher, her voice firm. "Then we need to make it understand that we're not easy prey." Suddenly, a violent tremor struck the ship. Everyone was thrown off balance. A terrible sound rang out from the ship's hull. A large crack had appeared. "Damn it! The pressure system is dropping rapidly," a technician yelled. Ethan dashed to the control panel. "We need to stabilize the system now. If we don't, the ship will be crushed by the water pressure." But before they could do anything, a massive tentacle slammed into the cockpit window. The reinforced glass rattled violently, small cracks appearing. The Kraken Leviathan had returned, and this time, it wasn't planning on letting them survive. "Fire now!" Jim screamed. Emily immediately pulled the trigger. The electric harpoon shot straight into the tentacle, sending a powerful current through the creature's body. A roar shook the ocean. The Kraken Leviathan swung its tentacle with great force, smashing part of the ship's compartment, and seawater flooded in violently. The situation was becoming desperate. The Leviathan might not last much longer. But Ethan wasn't ready to give up. "We still have one chance, but it's a risky one." He looked at Jim and Emily. "We have to lure it into the Mariana Trench." Jim's eyes widened. "Are you crazy? That's the deepest point on Earth. If we fall into it, our chances of survival are almost zero." "Yes, but it's also the only place deep enough to bury this monster." A terrifying silence fell over them. They didn't have much time to decide. Jim gritted his teeth. "Fine. Everyone, prepare for a suicide mission." The Leviathan ship began to accelerate, heading straight for the Mariana Trench, dragging the nightmare waiting for them below. The Leviathan drifted aimlessly in the black water, each crew member aboard wearing an expression of extreme tension. The sonar screen still showed the faint trace of the Kraken Leviathan, but it was no longer chasing them. An eerie silence enveloped everything. Dr. Ethan Graves stared intently at the screen, his gaze heavy. We haven't escaped this yet. I don't believe it's just going to let us go like this. Captain Jim Reynolds crossed his arms and sighed. The question is it waiting for us? Or is it hunting us in a different way? Dr. Emily Carter silently double-checked the data on the control panel. Something's not right. The water pressure in this area is lower than usual. If I'm not mistaken, we may be near a new abyss, a place no human has explored. A chill ran down everyone's spine. If an oceanic black hole really existed here, it could be the Kraken's true lair. A domain where no one was allowed to set foot. Suddenly, the sonar signal was completely lost. Everything plunged into absolute darkness. Boom. A violent shock hit the ship, sending the team crashing to the ground. The sound of metal grinding echoed, signaling that the water pressure was rising. Jim grabbed the radio. Everyone to battle stations now. We may be attacked. A screeching roar echoed up from beneath the ship. In the dim light of the emergency lamps, a massive shadow appeared outside the reinforced window. It wasn't the Kraken Leviathan. Something larger, older, was rising from the depths. The darkness of the deep ocean was thicker than ever. The Leviathan ship shook violently as the shockwaves from the previous battle still rippled through the water. The alarm systems wailed incessantly, drowning the control room in flashing red lights. Captain Jim Reynolds gripped the helm tightly, his face stern. We can't keep going like this. If we don't find a way to fight back, the monster will crush us. Dr. Ethan Graves quickly scanned the display screens. The Kraken Leviathan is still alive, and it's coming back. I'm picking up energy pulses from it. It seems like it's summoning something. Dr. Emily Carter bit her lip, her eyes fixed on the sonar screen. Another signal appeared, smaller but just as terrifying. We don't just have one enemy, something else is coming closer. From the darkness, massive shapes slowly emerged. A swarm of bizarre creatures, their bodies like giant rays, but with long, serpentine tentacles, swam around the ship. Their eyes glowed green, casting an eerie light under the deep sea. We're surrounded, one of the crew members shouted. The Kraken Leviathan roared again, as if commanding the swarm to attack. Its massive tentacles struck, slamming into the ship's hull, causing the electrical systems to flicker violently. Jim gritted his teeth. Prepare to fire torpedoes. We have no other choice. Ethan quickly tapped the control panel. The weapon systems aren't fully restored, but I can launch a salvo. Emily nodded. Do it now. Otherwise, we won't get another chance. The torpedo shot out, tearing through the dark water. A deafening explosion rang out, as one of the monsters was blown into pieces. But the Kraken Leviathan didn't stop. It charged at them with terrifying speed, like a living nightmare in the ocean. Jim yelled, activate the energy shields. We're going to ram through them. The Leviathan's engines roared to life once again, the ship shaking as it accelerated to maximum speed. A violent collision occurred, followed by a series of smaller explosions, as the ship plowed through the swarm of monsters. The Kraken Leviathan roared in fury, but the Leviathan temporarily broke free from the encirclement. However, they knew the monster hadn't given up. The darkness of the ocean enveloped the Leviathan, as the ship drifted aimlessly through the cold waters. The main systems had suffered severe damage from the battle with the Kraken Leviathan. The emergency lights flickered, reflecting the tense faces of each crew member. Dr. Ethan Graves braced himself against the control panel, sweat streaming down his face. We have less than 20% energy left. If we don't find a way to repair the engines, the ship will sink to the bottom of the ocean. Captain Jim Reynolds gritted his teeth, his cold eyes scanning the display. We can't let that happen. We need a plan. Emily, how's the engine compartment? Dr. Emily Carter shook her head, her voice grim. Not good. The cooling system is badly damaged, and one of the oxygen reserve tanks is punctured. If we don't fix it soon, we'll die from lack of air before the Kraken comes back. Outside the ship, a massive shadow silently slid through the water. The Kraken Leviathan hadn't left. It was hunting. Its tentacles brushed lightly against the ship's hull, making eerie sounds like metal being scraped. Ethan took a deep breath. We could use the EVA diving suits to go outside and make repairs, but it's dangerous. If the Kraken notices. Jim cut him off. We have no choice. I'll go. Emily immediately protested. You can't go alone. The Kraken is still out there. One mistake, and you'll become its next meal. Jim smiled faintly, but his gaze remained resolute. I'm the captain. I have to do this. But I need someone to guide me from inside. Ethan, can you direct me over the radio? Ethan nodded. I'll do my best. But remember, if it detects you, I'm not sure we can save you in time. Jim didn't respond. He simply looked at everyone one last time, before stepping into the diving suit chamber. When the door sealed shut, Emily and Ethan could only watch through the screen, their hearts pounding as Jim gradually moved away from the ship, facing the deadly abyss, and the darkness concealing the giant monster. Inside the Leviathan, the atmosphere was suffocating with tension. The alarm blared across the ship, as the system detected unusual vibrations on the ocean floor. Dr. Ethan Graves furrowed his brow, his eyes glued to the radar screen. There's something very big. Bigger than the Kraken Leviathan. Dr. Emily Carter held her breath, her hand gripping the chair tightly. It can't be. If there's something bigger, we have no chance of surviving. Captain Jim Reynolds gritted his teeth, and turned his chair toward them. This might be the source of everything that's happening. We need to decide now, continue the investigation, or retreat before it's too late. Before anyone could respond, the ship shook violently. A shockwave from the ocean floor slammed into the hull, nearly knocking everyone off their feet. On the screen, a massive shape was slowly emerging from the deep darkness. A piercing screech echoed through the water, sharp like a blade cutting through eardrums. The ship began to sway harder, as if being pulled down into the abyss. Ethan shouted in panic, "We can't stay here any longer. If that thing can create shockwaves like this, it could tear the ship apart in an instant." Jim slammed his hand onto the control panel. "Increase speed. We need to get out of this area immediately." But just as the engines roared to full power, a massive shadow swept past the observation window, leaving the entire crew stunned. A pair of fiery red eyes, larger than anything they had ever seen, stared straight at the ship, almost as if it were a warning. This was no mere monster. It was the embodiment of the deepest darkness. The metallic screeching continued in the Leviathan's hull, signaling that the situation was growing more critical. The main engine roared as the ship struggled to escape the chaotic currents. Then, suddenly, a colossal shadow rose from the ocean floor, blocking their escape. Dr. Ethan Graves squinted at the radar screen. The sonar scan revealed a creature of unimaginable size. "My God! What are we facing?" Dr. Emily Carter swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "It's not like the Kraken Leviathan. This is something far worse." Captain Jim Reynolds tightened his grip on the wheel, his face grim. "There's no turning back now. If we don't find a way to fight it, it will crush us right here." The entire ship trembled violently as a giant tentacle struck the hull, leaving a large crack. The alarm system blared loudly, red lights flashing wildly. "We need a direct strike," Jim shouted. Ethan quickly activated the weapon systems. "Activate the electro-torpedoes. If we don't take it down now, we won't get a second chance." Emily rushed to the control panel, typing in the launch codes. A high-pitched shriek came from the depths, as if the monster sensed the threat. Its tentacles tightened, pulling the ship down further. Jim screamed, "Fire now!" A barrage of electro-torpedoes shot out from the ship's hull, heading straight for the creature. A flash of blue light erupted in the dark water, followed by a powerful electric shockwave spreading across the area. A seismic roar tore through the water, shaking the ocean to its core. The monster howled in agony, its tentacles thrashing violently, creating massive waves. In that brief moment, Leviathan seized the opportunity and pushed the engines to full power, racing away from the danger zone. But as the ship just managed to escape its range, a pair of red eyes reappeared from the darkness. This monster was not done yet. The Leviathan roared as its engines reached their limit. Below the dark ocean, the giant creature was still in pursuit, its red eyes burning like hellfire. Dr. Ethan Graves staggered, trying to keep his balance while continuously monitoring the data on the screen. It's accelerating. We won't escape it just by speed. Dr. Emily Carter gripped the armrest of her chair, her eyes wide with panic. Is there any way to slow it down? Weapons? Diversions? Captain Jim Reynolds gritted his teeth, his hands moving rapidly across the control panel. We only have a few long-range torpedoes, but I'm not sure they'll work on that thing. Suddenly, a terrifying impact tilted the ship violently to one side. The sound of metal scraping filled the air as the hull was torn. On the screen, the giant creature became more clearly visible, a grotesque form, with long tentacles wrapped around its main body, its thick scales reflecting the dim light from the ship's lamps. Ethan shouted, "It's trying to drag us to the ocean floor." A sudden voice came through the internal communication system, "The engine compartment is damaged. If we don't act now, we'll lose the entire propulsion system." Jim ordered firmly, "Activate the torpedoes. Right now." Emily dashed to the control panel, entering the launch codes. 2 torpedoes shot out, cutting through the darkness toward the monster. A second later, a blinding explosion ripped through the surface of the water, sending Leviathan flying. The screen flickered from the shockwave, but when the view cleared, what they saw left them speechless. The monster was still there, completely unharmed. It roared an ear-splitting scream and charged toward them at terrifying speed. The alarm echoed throughout the Leviathan as the gigantic creature stayed right behind. The darkness of the deep sea seemed to swallow everything, with only the red flashing lights from the control panel reflecting on the crew's tense faces. Dr. Ethan Graves slammed his fist on the control panel, his voice urgent, "The engine can't handle this pressure much longer. If we don't get out in time, the ship will be crushed." Captain Jim Reynolds gripped the wheel tightly, trying to steer the ship in evasive maneuvers. "We can't let it follow us forever. We need some way to slow it down." Dr. Emily Carter quickly scanned the data on the screen, her eyes lighting up with a glimmer of hope. "There's a deep crevice ahead. If we can lower it into there, the extreme pressure could make it harder for it to follow." But the monster didn't give them a chance. A giant tentacle slammed into the hull, making the entire ship shudder violently. The electrical systems flickered continuously, some control panels exploding, sending sparks flying through the cockpit. Jim shouted, "Hold steady. We're going into the crevice now." Leviathan surged forward at full speed, heading into the dark abyss of the deep ocean trench. But the creature stayed on their tail, its red eyes piercing the darkness, like a relentless god who never sleeps. Just as the ship entered the high-pressure zone, an unexpected shockwave struck. Rocks from the trench walls began to collapse, forming a natural barrier between the ship and the monster. Ethan gasped for breath, looking through the observation window. "We might have escaped." Emily wasn't so sure, her eyes still fixed on the sonar screen. But just then, a low growl echoed from the darkness. From afar, deep in the cold night of the ocean floor, another pair of eyes, larger, more terrifying, slowly opened. The Leviathan surged forward in the dark depths of the ocean, its engines roaring at full power. But no matter how fast they tried, the colossal entity behind them remained close, never letting go. Dr. Ethan Graves stared at the radar screen, his voice hoarse from the tension. "It's still chasing us. Its speed is unbelievable." Dr. Emily Carter panted, her eyes wide with panic. "We can't keep running. If it attacks, we won't have a chance." Captain Jim Reynolds gripped the wheel tighter, his jaw clenched. "Then we'll have to face it." "But how?" Before anyone could speak, the ship suddenly lurched. A violent impact shook the entire deck, and alarms blared throughout. From the observation window, a massive tentacle was wrapping around the hull, squeezing as if trying to crush it. Ethan yelled, "It's got us." Jim rushed to the control panel, activating the high-voltage pulse mode. "Hold steady. I'll try to make it let go." A burst of electricity shot through the dark water, causing the monster to roar in fury. But instead of releasing its grip, it tightened even more. Emily trembled as she looked outside. "We can't win by force. There has to be another way." A shrill screech sounded, and from the darkness, those red eyes appeared again. This time, it wasn't just hunting, it was declaring war. Jim gritted his teeth, growling, "Prepare for battle. If this is the end, at least we won't die without a fight." The Leviathan glided through the ocean's darkness, its engines roaring as it struggled to escape the tremendous pressure from the giant creature below. But no matter how much speed they gained, they could still feel an invisible pull, as if a giant hand were holding them fast. Dr. Ethan Graves frantically checked the systems. "We can't escape. The water pressure is increasing unnaturally. Something down there is pulling us in." Dr. Emily Carter squinted at the sonar screen. A massive, pitch-black void appeared on the map, an uncharted abyss never recorded in any documents. "My God! This isn't just a monster. There's a whole world down there," she whispered. Captain Jim Reynolds gripped the wheel tightly, cold sweat trickling down his forehead. "We have no choice. Prepare to fire the torpedoes. If it won't let go, we'll attack." Just as he was about to give the order, the ship suddenly fell into free fall, like being sucked into an endless abyss. Everyone on board screamed as objects flew around. The alarm blared loudly. Outside, the faint lights of the Leviathan illuminated something. A massive stone structure, covered in seaweed and traces of unidentified creatures. Ethan stammered, "This isn't just a deep hole. It's a sunken city. A lost civilization. And we've just been pulled into its territory." From the darkness, those red eyes appeared again, but this time it wasn't just one. Dozens, even hundreds, of pairs of eyes opened, illuminating the night at the ocean floor. Then, a sound echoed, not the growl of a monster, but an ancient language. A voice from the deep warned the intruders. "Outsiders, leave, or become part of the darkness."